Welcome in to the latest episode of the Betting the Pitch NFL edition. I'm your host, the real underscore G Warner, joined by A underscore Schnicker, wearing a hat inside like it's allowed in the year of our Lord 2025. But we're 2-0. I'm wearing the same shirt again. Yes, I did wash it. Well, no one actually knows that. But we went 2-0 on our double best bet on Saturday evening with Jaden Daniels taking us to the promised land and knocking out those Detroit Lions. Sorry for those of you that teased the Chiefs and the Lions. I don't know what to say about the end of the Chiefs game, but we'll get into everything on this card. Andrew Snicker, how you doing tonight? These minutes are going to go fast.
Yep, it's only two games, but we're gonna sit here and be like, "Oh, we got plenty of." Actually, no, I don't think we can screw this one up. I think we'll be okay here. And also, I didn't know that that was a rule that you weren't supposed to wear a hat inside. I wear hats inside, basically all my life. But I'm really excited for these both of these games. I think there's an obvious, top card kind of, but in the public perception, but I don't think that that's necessarily the case.
Okay.
You
Well, we're going to get into this, and I'm looking
know?
forward to it. I would say that if you're looking in the like manners playbook, I think hats are designed for protecting you from weather
Yeah, this
outside.
isn't like the 1700s anymore, though.
Right. So you'd think that there's actually less chance of there being a leak in your home and dropping on your head, but that's
Now it's just
neither here nor
now
there.
it's a courtesy if you have if you're having a bad hair day or if you haven't had a haircut in a while. It's better to disguise it, to hide it than to have people have to look at it. So I'm not gonna.
All I can tell you is I agree it's a courtesy when I put clothes on during the day, and you never know what I'm wearing when you can only see the top up on the NFL podcast presented by the Betting Pitch Podcast Network. So we'll start on Sunday, where we're going to go through everything we went through. We might as well shout out again from the mountaintops. 2-0 in our Washington Commanders pick. We double best betted it. Good chance we might do that on this episode, though we don't discuss this before we come on, so we'll see. But we are now 3-1 for our playoff best bets. Nice 75%, and we look forward to blasting those numbers even higher. So we'll start in Philadelphia, which I actually looked at the weather today. Looked like it was going to be 40 degrees projected on Sunday. I think not so bad. It seems to me that there's one team that wants bad weather, one team that wants good. But last night, both these games were totaled at the same exact number, which was kind of wild to me. But right now, according to our friends at BetOnline, if you're not a member at BetOnline or SportsBetting.ag, their sister site, go follow links to the podcast description on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or on YouTube to get some free money before the season ends. I might as well use it on the college basketball season or the soccer season, whatever's coming up. But we got the Washington Commanders, 6-point underdogs with a total of 47.5 visiting the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I mean the name of the game is let's start with the weather since we talked about it. We'll get that out of the way quick. I think both of these games are going to be pretty decent. We're recording this on Wednesday, and I don't like to look into weather forecasts more than like 60 hours in advance to actually feel like, hey, this is solid. And I have a lot of meteorologist friends, and they say the same thing. Like if it's more than 2.5, 3 days out, they don't really know exactly what's going on. They have some ideas, but not like a firm prediction.
So
So
I'm
we're still
seeing
like kind of in that gray
predicted,
area.
hold on. I'm seeing predicted 39 degrees, which is the
Yeah.
second highest reading of the 40-degree day.
Yes.
39 degrees, 10% precipitation, and we did see quite a bit of weather in last week's game, I think.
Right. Right. And I don't even think there's wind in either really. It's like pretty mild 5 to 10 mile an
10
hour
miles an
wind,
hour projected right now. I feel like wind
which
is
is
probably
fine.
the most difficult to predict of
Yes,
all
for
weather.
sure. Yeah, it's harder to know until you get closer to it, and then it still has to be like 20-mile-an-hour gusts, or there's just so many different variances. Anyways, this is not a weather podcast. We could really get into it, but we'll talk about the football. Okay, so last week when we broke down Washington, we just like everyone else, we're in awe of what Jane Daniels has done, and we've pretty much found the game plan that Washington likes to deploy to win these games. You rely on Jane Daniels to extend drives with his legs, and not just extend drives, but to create offense that way. And then once you've given up or you've decided, okay, we got to suck in to stop this run, he's gonna chuck it deep and hope for the splash play. Um, and most of this year they've been hitting. Last week was no different. We talked about Detroit, and maybe there was a little bit of noise in the defense after we saw what Minnesota had done the previous weeks. That performance in this regular season finale wasn't as impressive, and Washington just tore them apart. I don't really want to deal. I don't want to go too far back into Detroit type stuff, but there's been a lot of complaints about the offense and Jared Goff and those things. I mean, there's you cannot blame the Detroit Lions offense for what happened last week. And Washington is here. They're at this spot, and I think some people last week maybe would have looked at our bet and said, hey, that's like a pretty public or a pretty square side. But in the NFL, the public has their say, and it's what I don't care what side I'm on as long as it's a winning side.
I agree. And so we got it in, recorded on Tuesday last week. We're doing Wednesday this week. Thank you, A_Snicker, for working with my schedule and the fact that I tried to watch some games live last night, which is always a mistake because no matter what, I always get spoiled on something I was going to watch later. Um, but and also watching two like down to the line college basketball games, as we just saw one with Colorado State and Boise State just a second ago before we got on, which delayed us recording a few minutes as well. Thank you again, A_Snicker. But last night, just watching two games that are really coming down the line. It's hard enough for me to watch one game that's like really in the balance, but watching two back to back, I do have two TVs set up right on top of each other, but like it drives me absolutely bananas. So I don't know how people do it, like the 8 screens at once. Like I respect it. I just don't know how it's done. But getting back to this game, we did give out the Commanders 9.5 point underdogs, closed 8. So we won some prize for the CLV Nation out there. Keeps us warm when our bets do lose, or I guess if it seemed like there was one constant in last week's games. I don't know if you noticed it, but hopefully this comes through as I want to make sure it actually does. Let's see.
Who let the dogs out?
Are we are we feeling the dogs this week again? Because we got two of them. We'll get to the games in a little bit. I guess the second one, but I mean, it wasn't that hard. Pick an underdog last week, especially if you got a late number on that Houston Chiefs game and you covered. The difference here is we're only at 6 points, so we're below a touchdown. Didn't matter for the Commanders as big underdogs who won last week. I don't know how many people played the money line rather than taking the points, but um, I feel like the Commanders and the Lions was a game within a game, which is very different than we're probably going to see. I think we got questions on the health of Jalen Hurts. I think we have a lot of questions about Jalen Hurts in general that have certainly been raised on this podcast over the years we've been doing it. But I also feel like there's probably a lot of love on the Commanders now. I don't know that was a square play. I think everyone saw the Lions demolish the Minnesota Vikings, which might have looked like a little bit of fool's gold for a lot of the marketplace, but still being bigger than a touchdown favorite and not even winning straight up and not really having much of a chance late. I think we can throw out all the haters because I feel like there aren't that many in general, and I think the Commanders with a straight up win. I'm not going to apologize, as neither were you. The big question though is how does that filter through with the Commanders playing the Eagles this week? Yeah, they're on the road, but we've kind of seen the home field advantage of the NFL certainly diminished over seasons. And we could even argue in the same season that playoff home field advantage matters less than it does during the every week. I feel like there's motivation differences, there's setup differences. And at this point in the year, we got really good teams, and I feel like you'd almost kind of weaken those type of numbers. My question for you really is, to me, this is a great Eagles defense, which I think we can all see, and a Commanders defense that no one really respected coming into the season that has greatly overperformed, probably because they brought in a defensive head coach who seems competent, and I'm certain that quarterback is helping as well. Um, is there anything you could take from the regular season meetings or from seeing these teams twice that might make it a little bit less of an advantage to Jaden Daniels, for example, because the Lions hadn't seen him?
Yeah, I think yeah, there's a couple things for sure. Saquon Barkley is the star of the NFL playoffs so far, and by the way, he just keeps hitting his postseason numbers. Like every prop that's up there, oftentimes at this point of the year when you've had the fantasy football darling, this is when you start going under on his rushing totals. He's hitting it every week, which
Like
is
every single quarterback passing yardage did in that last round, which we
exactly
talked about the
right.
underdogs did so well. Yeah.
Exactly right. So the Eagles have a pretty simple game plan here. Jalen Hurts, though, his health matters, and they have to be able to stay on the field. We did not talk about Quinion Mitchell, the defensive back for the Eagles. His backup also left the game. Those are injuries you're going to have to monitor. Obviously, we're talking postseason, so injury reports they mean something, but they don't mean as much. If there's any chance these guys are going to play, they're obviously going to play. But how
If
effective is he going to
Toradol
be?
is available, they will shoot it. So
Which
just
is real, like, those are things you got to consider for first half numbers. We've done that a lot with like Patrick Mahomes type stuff. When he had that ankle injury, you look at first half over full game. Don't want to go too far off the rails with that, but I think the Eagles' game plan is going to be pretty simple. Uh, Feed the rock, keep Washington's offense off the field, kind of similar to what Washington's been trying to do, and I guess I should say feed Saquon the ball and
pound the
rely on
rock.
that defense.
I like pound the rock. So in the two matchups so far this season, I want to pull that up before we get too far. The Eagles were 26-18 winners at home to the Washington Commanders with a full-ish team, not looking too deeply in the box score in that one. And then the second game was kind of marred by an early Jalen Hurts concussion, which then proceeded to miss the next 2 weeks, and then had a questionable tag and came back for the first round of the playoffs. But the Commanders were able to win that second game 36-33. Is there much you can read into those results for a third matchup? Because you don't have it's really tough to beat a team three times because
Yeah,
they split so far.
yeah. No, I mean the Commanders are legit. Like that's what I take from this. And it's all about the market perception of them. Um, we knew they were going to be underdogs in the playoffs. The last, like when they were kind of limping down the stretch, it was when the numbers were getting flipped and they were favorites by touchdown favorite against New Orleans. Um, you know, big favorite. I'm forgetting the other game they were a pretty big favorite in. Um, that's a whole different scenario for this
Dallas
team.
to close the season.
Yep. Yes, which was like kind of like a scrub game, but Jane Daniels played a little bit.
Yep.
So that's I guess the main takeaway is Jane Daniels has been great. Sam Cosmi is the offensive lineman that we're familiar with. He's out for the season.
Yep.
But like these are all things you're going to monitor, but they're all factored into the number at this point. I feel like
Okay,
because it's
let's talk about that number. So we currently see a +6 on, or at least I'm seeing it because I
yeah,
just
yeah,
allowed. That number has moved. So I initially saw let's see, I want to make sure I have this right. I saw a 5.5, then a 4.5, and then it come back up to 6. So it seems to me like there's been a fair amount of movement, all in I guess, area of point spreads that aren't so concerning because NFL games rarely land five. I guess to put it as
yeah,
boldly as that. Three, four, three, the most important number by far. Four, a little bit important. Six, probably a little more important than four, I would suspect. Seven, reasonably important, but not doesn't really matter so much to three. We've seen this line climb from an initial bet down of the Washington Commanders. Do you expect some of that money to come back on the Commanders and push this game down like it did from the 9.5 to the 8 and then one straight up? Or do you think that there's going to be more of, because there's only two games in the NFL season until the Super Bowl left. So whoever is, I mean, I don't know if people are signing up for new accounts. If you are, go check the link to the podcast descriptions. But if you are looking to bet some NFL before the season ends and you're trying to figure out what is the safest way for me to get this bet to then fund my
mhm.
bet for Sunday night, the biggest granddaddy of them all, if I can quote Keith Jackson. I would think that side is the Eagles. And in my life, I always expect favorites and overs to get bet.
Yeah. I think that's probably fair. I think no matter how we feel about Jalen Hurts and his efficiency or his ability to throw the ball to some really great receivers that are just not able to be a factor. His health or his injury reports as we get to Saturday and Sunday are going to matter to the number because yes, we've talked about every game except for that Baltimore Buffalo game took a pretty big move on game day, like hours before kickoff. And that's just like all that public money and obviously the limits going up. Um, so yeah, I would say it's probably safe to expect um, if you like Washington, we always talk about, choosing your spots, market entry. See, closing line value is great, but like you can also, if you try to, predict where the market's going, then if you like one other side, you can wait it out and see if we get closer to kick and maybe get a 7 or a cheap buy to 7 potentially might be an option there. Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think it's worth if you want Washington, it's worth waiting because 5.5, 6 doesn't really matter much to me.
Yeah, I think there's I've been doing a really good job of buying to 3 on 2.5 point underdogs this year that won straight up. I think I did that 100% of the time, except for a Minnesota Vikings Seattle Seahawks game in Seattle towards the end of the season, which maybe one time is enough that you're like, oh, I did it right this whole time. But the others were pretty brutal. My question, I guess, and just I mean, I guess I'll state it as normally as I would. The Eagles got bet pretty heavily right into kickoff in the snow, as I don't think a forecast changed necessarily, but against the Rams last weekend, Jake Elliott, who they paid a lot of money to kick, doesn't kick long field goals and also clearly doesn't kick extra points very well anymore, as 2 of those big ones were pretty significant in changing the direction of a lot of money flow. Last weekend, though certainly you could have seen some different things happening if the Rams were down 9 late, blah blah blah.
Right.
Um, I just my thing that you said about the injury reports on Jalen Hurts, like I don't know how you can read into anything. Like we got beat writers, I like what could we possibly see this weekend that makes you think, oh, that knee is better? Because to me, the entire offense is Saquon Barkley until it isn't. And when Jalen Hurts is, to me, what I think he's best at, I don't think he's a great quarterback. He's not very accurate, but what he is good at the quarterback position is basically controlling a game where I think he throws the ball out of bounds very well until the Rams kind of forced him to stay in the pocket last week and didn't make that as much of an option. But
Yeah.
he's very mobile. And I guess that's the biggest question is this knee, if it makes him less mobile and he all of a sudden becomes a pocket passer, then that's going to put so much on Saquon Barkley to win this game, which he certainly can, has shown he can hurdle people backwards, all that sort of stuff. I'm sure you might have seen that once or twice on a highlight reel. But the big question to me is starting first, can the Commanders and Bobby Wagner in his 14th NFL season or something, maybe 44th, can they stop the Eagles from running and force Jalen Hurts to win this game?
Yes. Yeah, I think they can because of where I think Jalen Hurts is health wise, and all I can do is I don't have a lot of inside sources in Philadelphia. I don't really want to give that away on this podcast with our thousands of listeners, but I don't. Um,
Thousands,
so
you mean millions,
so all I can say is
trillions.
what I've seen with my eyeballs, like Jalen Hurts post concussion. Now this injury has not been good. So that's all I can go off of because that's what I've seen the most recent. And I can't imagine like if it's one of those things like if he goes out there and just has, that the Super Bowl performance where he was out of this world, it's like you tip your hat and say, okay, you beat me on this one. But like what I've seen most is it's not a good performance from a quarterback. So yeah, of course, I certainly think they could sell out to stop the run game and have a chance here.
All
I
right.
think we should move on. Otherwise, we're gonna like do the thing again. And
Right. That's right. Last thing I'll say, and then we will move on to the second game of 2, which hopefully we can get in. So Washington led 7-0 in the first quarter with a healthy Jalen Hurts. 7-3 at halftime, still Washington. 10 to
yeah,
6 entering the fourth quarter, Washington, and then
yeah,
a 20-point fourth quarter for the Philadelphia Eagles to win by 8, 26 to 18. Look at Jalen Hurts. He had 221 yards passing, was 18 of 28. It's pretty efficient, but 15 yards in sacks. So about 200 yards passing. That's not a lot, but that kind of goes along the lines. That's probably a good game for Jalen Hurts in the NFL playoffs over his career. Saquon Barkley, 26 carries, 146 yards, 5.6 average yards per carry with a 39-yard long run. I feel like if I'm the Commanders, I'll sign up for that in
yeah.
this. And
That the Eagles win. That was Saquon in that 20-point outburst in the fourth quarter. That was Saquon breaking a couple long runs. That's where they just started leaning on him and they broke free. So I think everyone's just kind of riding the Eagles into the Super Bowl. Um, and that seems dangerous to me with how they've played.
It seems dangerous to you. They were my pick in a pool I filled out, but I also had
I
Washington.
mean, they're my Super Bowl pick too. We've
But I
talked about
also
them
had
all year.
Minnesota taking out Detroit, so I think I'm probably cooked.
I think
So
you're
we'll
done.
move to the next game on the list, and there's only one more to discuss, which I knew we were going to have enough time to cover, despite all the shenanigans that Andrew Sinker is trying to throw out there, as trying to question who would question me as a host of the NFL podcast on
We've run
Bet
out of time so many
Network.
times.
We have the Chiefs 2-point favorites right now at home, as I am adorned in their gear for my one trip to Arrowhead, if I'm allowed to call it that. GEHA Field, I think. Thank you for their sponsorship. We appreciate your support. Total, like I said, is the same in both these games, 47.5, which feels kind of weird to me that these games are expected to be scoring the same amount of points, considering to me, one game is a big favor that only can run.
Yeah.
And a very, I guess, elusive and potential big underdog that scores some points, but I don't think it's in their best interest to do that. Now we have a slobber knocker. So here's the big one. I guess we'll start with the Bills 2-point underdogs. Is that a lot of respect?
Is that a lot of respect for Buffalo? Is that what you're asking?
That's what I'm asking.
Okay, so I mean, what would that put? That would put Buffalo on. Okay, yeah, even. You're saying I would say Arrowheads. Gosh,
So
I
these
keep
two
going
teams are
Arrowhead.
equal. The Bills are 2.5-point favorites in Buffalo, week 11,
Yeah,
November
they're equal.
17th, it was.
Are they equal?
To me, that says the Bills were slightly better, and I think based on like we said, with a lot of favorite money, favorite bets coming in, especially late, to me it seems like the Bills are rated as the better team on a neutral
Yeah.
field. Clearly, we don't have a neutral field, as Taylor Swift will be shown many, many times. Also, incredible cover, Travis Kelce. Thank you for so many catches, even with a big, wide open drop,
Yes.
get over the total.
That was good. That was great for you.
That was nice. Just, one day at a time, just trying to get 17-point leads in Colorado State basketball games
Hey,
to
they covered.
matter less and less. Oh yes, they
I had to
covered.
enjoy. I got to watch them. This was a good 4 final minutes for me
Yeah.
with no money involved.
Good for everyone involved. Especially for my hairline. But we saw Buffalo as small as a 1-point underdog climb to two. Total has dropped from
Yeah.
48.5 to 47.5. So we've seen some under money come in, which makes sense with two good defenses, unless we don't think they're good. And then the Bills 2-point underdogs feels respectful. It was my initial take.
Yeah. I think it feels respectful. Um, I think we're like let's chase this narrative a little bit because we're gonna go back to last playoffs with the Chiefs' disrespect when they
Okay.
were underdogs.
Okay.
Obviously they're not an underdog in this situation. But a
You'd
lot of the
argue on a
narrative,
neutral they would be, but yes, they are not today.
but they're not getting that deep in the weeds. A lot of talk this week about the officials and how they protect the Chiefs and how I, it's
You think
not
that
necessarily
that's
his.
going to change with all these Swifties and the Super Bowl ratings riding on?
That's what I mean. No, it's like it's almost history repeating itself because you know that Mahomes, who had to address it in a press conference to say, no, I don't think I'm getting preferential treatment, they're going to use that as like, oh, here we are again being slighted, not being taken as winning these games with our.
I think Hunter Biden said the same thing. Keep going.
Okay, so I'm just that's a question I'm throwing out there. That's the narrative part of this podcast. Um, the Chiefs defense, they have their pieces back in the secondary that I think are pretty good. Um, they have Steve Spagnuolo still, last time I checked,
Yep.
so
Yep.
still good there.
Yep.
And they have I'm a fan of Joe Brady, the Bills offensive coordinator, but to me, like I you know how I feel about Sean McDermott.
Big fan.
I can't stand his coaching decisions. And even last week, good Lord.
I mean,
I'm mad because I'm mad because we're deprived of Baltimore and Kansas City rematch. I
ooh,
really am.
okay. Okay.
I'm pretty frustrated by that. And
Well,
Baltimore has no one to blame but themselves. But
uh, I know one guy that they could blame. And
I'm not going to do. They
he
can
wears
blame.
number
Actually, I mean, they shouldn't even blame just that one guy.
No.
What
I
other
think the guy to
stupid
blame. I
plays?
think number 8 is the guy to blame. I think it
Okay, thank you.
more
Yes,
so than
I
the
agree.
drop. More so than the
I
drop.
agree.
Drop was pretty bad, but Mark
The
Andrews.
drop was terrible, but like it was all the pieces that led up to that. Okay, gone off the rails a little bit here. Um,
That's why people listen. It's okay. 27-25. Baltimore comes storming back, but not enough because of a dropped 2-point conversion by, just a man who's down on his luck, a program that's down on their luck. Just really sad for the state of Oklahoma. And I'm really sad to see it.
okay, the Chiefs, like quietly, yes, the offense is still kind of plodding, and we've definitely gone back into Mahomes, Kelsey, like let's just feed Kelsey the ball in the playoffs type thing because that's the guy I trust. I do think they have other trustworthy guys. We know Xavier Worthy is uh caught a lot of steam lately. Hopkins hasn't really been a factor lately, but he's a veteran receiver, knows what he's doing there. And then Hollywood Brown is back and mostly healthy. Like, if anything, his speed is what matters. And just his ability to put that safety in question makes a big difference. So
It hasn't really worked for the Kansas City Chiefs running game so far, though.
no, and I don't know what they're going to do there. Like if we could figure out some player props there going under, like if we could figure out who's going to get the touches.
I mean, it seems like from a Kareem Hunt fantasy owner, let's say, if you're talking about this in the playoffs, 8 carries to 5 last week.
Yeah,
Isaiah Pacheco runs very hard, and I love watching him, but he runs into people very often. Kareem Hunt can't break tackles or can't get by anybody,
he's so
but
old.
he seems to pick his routes better, or at least maybe they block better for him. I don't know how to describe it, but looking at 22 carries for 50 yards against a suspect Texans defense, I think.
Yeah.
Not that impressive, though I guess they did lose 18 on a safety to end the game, which did swing some money in the
Certainly
desert,
did.
in the black
Again,
markets, everywhere.
I saw someone saying though, like if you bet the Chiefs prior to close, like that's on you. You don't bet the two-time Super Bowl champs 20 minutes before close and expect for that to
Even
be a
the
good result.
Swifties knew to bet the Chiefs before game time against.
Really.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe they're all
If
waiting
out of the
for their
four,
maybe they're waiting for their soccer bets to come in and just didn't have the money in there. Unfortunately, I've been there and taken a loss from it, and it is not as fun as a Colorado State 17-point choke job. Keep going.
okay, out of the four units that we'll see, what's the best out of those four, in your opinion?
Uh, I think the best two are if you're watching us live on video and Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or on YouTube. I think they're the shirt I'm wearing, but better two units, offense and defense.
They have the better offense of the two, and they have the better defense of the
I think
two.
so. I think so. I think Hollywood Brown, not sure how much he matters individually, but him added to basically another
Yeah.
threat. So there's basically, to me, Travis Kelce sits in the middle of the field. Doesn't matter if he gets 15 yards after the catch or gets somehow tackled from behind on what looked like a guaranteed touchdown for any NFL player, maybe even Taylor Swift herself, if she'd been on the treadmill before the game. But like he is, besides that one bad drop, which nearly cost me his over receptions prop, that was, to me, that was like that's exactly what Travis Kelce is, and he's got two speedsters around him, plus DeAndre Hopkins, who I think is a like lockdown, will catch the ball in a very important 3rd and 8, and
Yeah.
you need him on a 9 yard out.
I
You,
yeah, like I think that we've followed this narrative, and I've been part of it this year, talking about just the plotting Kansas City offense. I feel like they're in a pretty good spot,
they've been
and of
great.
course, and of course, in the time that they need to be in a good spot, like
I mean, this
Mahomes.
you could argue that they've been saving Travis Kelce for this entire season.
Oh, for
You could
sure,
argue
for
that,
sure,
I mean, Patrick Mahomes will not quarterback sneak during the regular season because he dislocated his knee 7 years ago.
right,
So, like, all these sort of things, it's amazing they're this good when the rest of the league is just dying to win a football game, and they won 15 out of 17, including not
yeah,
carrying the last week of the season. Um,
right.
Man, I mean, you can argue about who they played. Week 16, they beat the Texans, scored 27 points. Week 17, the Steelers 29 points. I mean, those are playoff teams right there, back to back. And those games weren't very close. Just, I guess you could argue Tank Dell's knee injury changed things a little bit against Houston, but to me, I feel like the Chiefs have been on a course that is going straight up in a certain direction. The Bills are great because they have one just phenomenal, unstoppable player. I don't know, like the use of the various running backs is impressive that they have a lot of guys that can get yards. Khalil Shakir seems great. But man, I don't see a lot of game changers besides the guy who holds the ball every play, which matters. But I feel like if you're backing the Bills here, taking 2 points, which is very little safety. Yes, there's possibility the Chiefs win by a single point, and that would be amazing. But chances are pretty slim, I think. Um, but from a Buffalo perspective, like, do you think Josh Allen is significantly better than Patrick Mahomes?
No,
Because
no,
if you don't, then where and maybe I just
no.
see it, maybe I don't see the forest for the trees.
Who who thinks? Do you think there are a lot of people that think Josh Allen's a better quarterback than Patrick
His
Mahomes?
fantasy stats are better.
Well, of
I think
course, like, but this is the real world, man. And I know
feel
you're
like
just
there's a lot of fantasy chatter that goes into who's a valuable quarterback, and Patrick Mahomes had been dogged for a lot of this season, last season,
right.
things like that. His stats have
Yes.
been pretty, but I swear that guy, when he's in the playoffs, he's a different human being. He's different than everyone else. He is so, to me, so on point in the playoffs that I mean, I think we did this last year on the same podcast. These two teams played against each other. And I think I took the Bills against the Chiefs. And
Did you? Because I just remember you being on the Chiefs basically every week in
well,
the playoffs last year.
I think that's eventually what happened because then I took them at Baltimore and then we both took them in the Super Bowl, if I remember correctly. But I
No,
think I
I
learned my
didn't,
lesson because I
unfortunately.
was sitting with our guy, Colin, and he, of course, being a big Chiefs guy, and me going in there being like, nope, rooting for the Bills today. And that was a really
Man, for a
uncomfortable
second you said Colin. I
afternoon.
was like, who is our friend Colin?
Yeah, well, I had to figure that out when I was checking into a Kansas City hotel, and I was like, "Oh,
Okay.
I'm here. There's Crosby. I won't say the last name." And they're like, "We don't have a guest here," and that, and I'm like, "What?" And then eventually figured it out.
I just, yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I, and maybe again, maybe there's something we're missing here. I don't want to hedge our conversations. I want to be like emphatic with our takes here. Um, yeah, I don't see anything different. I see Buffalo as the darling going into this game, like, because people are just desperate to see something different at this point. But like all the signs are pointing to Kansas City actually peaking at the right time again, because guess what? They know what they're doing. Like
Indeed,
there's something to this. It's not just like they're stumbling along the way and being like, oh, hey, funny, this is all working out the way we planned. Like there's a system to it. And before we go, I know we talked about the number a little bit with a two.
yep,
The money line right now, it's cheaper than it should be for the Chiefs. It's $1.31 at Bet Online.
yep.
At
Well,
-2, it probably should be like $1.35, maybe $1.40. Um, so that is something to consider if you're on a Wednesday night, Thursday morning saying, I got to get in on this game. I don't think you have to at this point, but
let's say it. Where does this number close? Is it going to close? Is it going to close three?
no, because I don't think they need to, similar to last week, I don't think they need to stake a claim in that way. I
Is it
think
going to close
you're
two
just
and a
going to
half
get
or
you're
one
going to
and a
get
half?
crazy action both
Is the
ways.
next move 2.5 or 1.5?
2.5. So if you do like Chiefs, maybe you do go now. That's what I expect. Two and a
I
half.
don't feel strongly about it, but for some reason, I feel like there's a lot of Buffalo money out there and that people will be betting this down to 1.5. I don't think it's worth the risk,
I,
though, potentially playing a Chiefs -2.5 bet. I think I might get in it too, right as we record this podcast. But I just
I
I don't feel like this number is right. I think there's also in some crazy world where the Chiefs suddenly get a ton of really good injury luck or something like that, and they close 3-point favorites. I don't know that I would still play the Bills there as a pretty big number to have as a middle. It's only a point, but to land three with a late field goal from Harrison Butker. That really interests me. And now we're coming into the podcast. So let's
Well,
get into
before
our
we
okay,
before
go
we
ahead.
wrap it up, I think it's worth saying the same thing we talked about with Jalen Hurts and saying all I know is what my eyes have seen over the last month, and I think it's the same thing with the Chiefs. If if Josh Allen goes out there and plays the game of his life, I'll tip my cap. I'll tip my cap indoors
Hmm.
to him and say, "All right, you win on this one." But my eyes have seen Kansas City too often in this spot. Uh,
Well,
like
if you'd like to hear more of Andrew Schwarzenegger, go follow him on Twitter and try to find a way to get him back on the Bet and Pitch Podcast Network as we are doing college basketball season stuff all over on pregame.com. We're expanding to 2 episodes per week now. We got Major League Baseball coming up with A. Brooks Betts. And if A_Schwarzenegger wants to show up on any sort of show, wearing a hat or not, indoors or out, he's welcome to. And if you want to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify or subscribe on YouTube, leave a comment thanking A_Schwarzenegger for his service. Please do, and maybe we'll find some way to get some stuff going in the off season. But we do have one Super Bowl episode coming back. Before we get there, though, we do pick each game in the playoffs. So Commanders +6, totals 47.5 at Philadelphia.
think we're gonna be so simpatico on these picks. We're gonna be so simpatico. Let's go Commanders +6.
Commanders +6. Buffalo, 2-point underdogs at Kansas City, totals 47.5.
Am I allowed to take the money line? Because I'll take Chiefs money line -131 if that's allowed.
Sure. I'll lay the two. I don't care.
You laid it too. This will be a fun little
I don't think it'll matter,
experiment
but
for
we'll
us.
see. Give us your best bet on this episode, the championships edition of the NFL podcast.
Yeah, we've talked about it for the last couple weeks, and I don't care what side it's on. I'm going to take the Commanders +6 uh, to keep it close against the Eagles.
Hey, this is real_G Warren on Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, and on YouTube. This is the second to last episode of the NFL podcast presented by the Bet and Pitch Podcast Network. You might have just heard we're 3-1 so far this NFL playoffs. We're 2-0 last week on a double best bet. Andrew Schwarzenegger is staying in the same grounds as he did just a week ago. He's taking Jaden Daniels and those Washington Commanders 6-point underdogs at Philadelphia. For my best bet on the real_G Warren on Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, and on YouTube, I'm gonna go with the shirt that I have on, the horse that I rode in here. I'll go with the Kansas City Chiefs 2-point favorites. You might want a -131 money line as advocated by Andrew Schwarzenegger, but I'll save you some juice. I'm not so worried by a 1-point win. Of course, that's a terrible thing to say, but I'll lay the Chiefs 2 points. I think they're a better team, better offense, better defense. And you want the full episode, please go check out Betting the Pitch on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or at the real_G Warner on YouTube. And we'll see you next week for the Super Bowl, or maybe 2 weeks from now. We'll see. But have a great evening. And that'll do it for this episode. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.